Hello and welcome back to the Schooner Pod. I'm your host, Bobby Howard. With me today, we've got Ty Lee. And Ty, today we're breaking down OU series with the Texas Tech Red Raiders. It's another edition of Bye Bye Big 12. And Ty, what an incredible series. Crazy it only started in the 90s, didn't have a lot of time before, almost entirely basically a Big 12 series, but a lot of memories between the two sides.
Yeah, for sure. In short, like I was telling you before the pod, Bobby, when I think of the OU versus Texas Tech series in these 20-something games that we've played together, I think just stereotypically Big 12 games. And obviously they're not all like this, but I just think of the no defense, slugfest. I mean, we'll talk about our favorite games here coming up, and obviously there's one that fits that bill. But I mean, I think of Kyler Murray battling, I think it was multiple quarterbacks, Alan Bowman and maybe someone else bouncing in and out one year. Obviously, Baker versus Mahomes in college with just an absolute star set. I mean, Lincoln Riley versus that other guy who is also went out to the West Coast and then failed as a coach. I forget his name, Cliff Kingsbury. And but yeah, I think of, those primetime games where it's just a stereotypical Big 12 matchup, and it's an exciting game, lots of offense seemingly every year. So we wanted to give them the respect of doing a live episode, which unfortunately we're not going to be able to do for every Big 12 member, although we are doing an episode for each one.
Yeah, for sure. And this is, when you think about, the Bye Bye Big 12 series, and, this is like one of those big ones. There are a couple teams, we're not going to say who, that it's like, yeah, okay, there's some stuff to talk about. Tech is one of those teams with a ton of shared history, not just on the field, but off of it. Obviously, Mike Leach came from Oklahoma, was his previous stop before, and then Mike Leach went on and repaid the favor, gave OU Lincoln Riley, all of that. Baker Mayfield played at both places, obviously, well documented. So a lot of shared history, a lot of it's maybe not quite a rivalry, but it's definitely a series that's chippy. So definitely starting out with two of the programs with a ton of shared history between them.
For sure. And you know what? I might need to do the math and think about this, but just looking at the all-time series, just quick mental math. So OU leads the series 23-7, which might actually be a better ratio in Tech's favor than Bedlam. So maybe this is a rivalry. I don't know. I don't know what the Bedlam series is off the top of my head, but it's got to be pretty close to a.
I do have that in my Bedlam ratio. Notes. I've done my Bedlam notes already, so I can let you know. But yeah, I mean, Tech's has made it a series, like you.
That's essentially 3-1.
Yeah,
which I think Oklahoma State has not hit that one. So
Oklahoma State is 19-7. Oklahoma State is 19. OU is 19-7 against Oklahoma State in Big 12 play, and Tech
in the Big 12. Okay, yeah,
20-7 in the Big 12 era. So not
essentially the same. Actually, 19-7 and 20-7 is.
How does that make any sense? I think
we played.
I clearly screwed up the math there.
No way we played Tech more than Oklahoma State.
I clearly screwed up the math there.
Oh, we played Tech in a Big 12 championship game.
No, we didn't. There's no way, because we were on the same conference, or the same division. Yeah, what happened there? Yeah, that's just bad math. Throw it out. Ignore the math. That's bad math on the Bedlam end, surely. Probably accidentally. I probably accidentally counted a Big 8 loss or win for Oklahoma State. That's probably what it was, because there's not a sharp divide there. We'll get to that when we get to that. But anyways, like you said, OU leads the series 20-7 in the Big 12 era. And a big point of that, Tech went 4-3 against OU from 2005 to 2011. That's a prime Stoops era. They were 2-1 against Sam Bradford. A team with Sam Bradford on it one year, he was hurt. But in fact, both years they won. Either he was hurt or they hurt him. So they got some big wins during some prime Bob Stoops era.
Yeah, which I mean that was sort of the golden era as well of Mike Leach at Texas Tech too, which has to be noted. I mean, you think back to sort of that era and those times. They had some tremendous players, and then Mike Leach going and bringing something really revolutionary with his offense out on that Tech team. So I'm not surprised that a coach who's known for his wiliness, or who was known for his wiliness, and had a good connection to Stoops, kind of knew Stoops's mind a little bit, was able to perform pretty well, especially with a pretty novel offense going out there against, again, not surprising that a Brent Venables coach team not doing well in the Big 12. So.
Yeah, Tech always got, and I mean, most of those games were in Lubbock, keep in mind, specifically Leach. Those run 2005, a very controversial loss. We'll definitely go into in depth on it. 1982 Boomer Sooner brought it up as well. A horrible call. We'll deep dive into that. And then obviously they cost Oklahoma a national championship shot in 2007 when Sam Bradford got hurt, gave OU their second loss, and what was a wild year. And then 2009 revenge for the jump around game, which we'll definitely talk about. So definitely quite a run for the Pirate. And his last game was that 2009 one. So he ended up on top. But yeah, after that, OU lost a horrible upset in 2011 to Tommy Tuberville in a 51-48, or just horrible. OU was ranked second, lost to an awful Tech team, and went on a 10-game winning streak, which ended last year for Texas Tech. Finally got their win in a 51-48 overtime win. So barring OU Texas Tech in the national championship, Big 12 championship, the series is done for the time being. So pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, and you touched on some of those games. I think maybe it's time to jump in and maybe talk about. I know last time I did one of these with you, we talked about our favorite games of this series. I think maybe we can save that, but I do want to dive in and hear some about those significant games. So I'm not that read up on 2005. Can you regale me the story of the controversy of this game? That the only thing I remember is that it was not played at a normal stadium, I think.
No, it was at Jones AT&T Stadium. It was at Texas Tech back when they were playing on that weird teal green crappy turf. And it was not a great year for OU. It was the Rhett Bomar year. They had kind of struggled, but this was kind of the frustrating nail in the coffin for that season. Texas Tech essentially got stopped on a 4th and 1. This is horrible podcasting because I'm just trying to describe it. The guy was clearly down. His knee was down. Refs didn't call it. Replay called it a touchdown still. One of the most confusing, if it wasn't for Oregon happening that very next year, would have been one of the most infamously bad calls ever in OU history. Still is. Texas Tech then responded by gloating about it, which they where it's actually kind of great and it's very Tech on brand. They put a screenshot of that touchdown with the caption, "He's in. Are you? Buy tickets today." And I'm like, damn you, Texas Tech, you that is just cheeky as hell, and I hate it. But yeah, it was a bad call. I really need to get video clips on this so I can illustrate it. But controversial, tough loss, frustrating as hell.
Yeah, to Tech's credit, I respect that. I respect them just owning it and like, yeah. He was in, just showing the plain evidence that he was not, and then just being like, yeah, he was in. It's OJ level. It was not funny when OJ did it. But
if we did it,
it's funny when it's something like this. It's funny.
The all-time legacy of that game, though, is the clip. I'm sure you've seen it, of the guy yelling at JD Runnels in the tunnel over and over, "Go Raiders!" All-time clip.
Mm-hmm.
At that point he said the refs tried to screw us, but they won anyways. I disagree. all-time moment there in the series. If we're talking about some other just frustrating, a lot of the frustrating games are like 2007, like Bradford got hurt in the first quarter, so we had a guy named Joey Halsley trying to beat Crabtree and Graham. Yeah, Graham Harrell. I almost called him Graham Colton. That's definitely not true. Not that is a Heritage Hall quarterback. Yeah. So yeah, Joey Halsley had to beat those two and lost and blew it. 2009 was the worst loss. That was an absolute blowout. 41-13, and they responded by doing the jump around on us. Awful stuff. But the worst, like I said, that 2011 OU was riding high. I'm pretty sure they were ranked first or second, and they lost to just an awful Texas Tech team led by Tommy Tuberville, who, not great. So if I had to pick the worst, it would be the one where we just completely blew it. It wasn't in Lubbock. You weren't fighting that crazy crowd. It just sucked.
So 2011. We were number one. Yeah.
Number one, lose at home. And that was unheard of back then. OU didn't lose at home. So to lose at home to a team like Texas Tech is just unacceptable. So that to me, worst loss, worst memory by far.
Yeah, that's a rough one. I guess to bounce it back to myself, thinking about the worst loss. I gotta pull up the year. This is terrible podcasting. I want to say it was right after, but I don't think we lost in 12.
We didn't lose for another 10 years.
2010.
Yeah, 2010.
We also lost in Norman. Pretty badly. Actually, no, we won in that one.
That's the one we won.
I'm not sure what I'm thinking. I think I am thinking of 2011 as well, running off of memory and vibes for this one. But no, I'm thinking of 2009. Pulling up the notes. Yeah. This is terrible.
It's all good. That one
podcasting, but yeah, we weren't a great team that year, but I don't know. There was something about that game.
It was bad. Well, it was a blowout, and we wore like these like white alternates that never were seen again.
The Stormtrooper uniform game. Yeah. Yes.
It was a Stormtrooper uniform game, never to be seen again. The bad loss column's tough for you because we haven't done a lot of losing. But I will say, bad game overall. I'm going to put it in there. 2016, absolutely horrible. Like, I hated the Patrick Mahomes Mayfield game. That was a horrible game to be at in person. We'll talk about that in the best category because people keep talking about it. But what are your thoughts on that?
That's my best. I mean, I think it's the most stereotypical one. You'd mentioned this before, but it's just Tech was always that team that just sort of gave us trouble. And obviously you look at the all-time series and it doesn't really look that way. But then, like we pointed out, there were just some inexcusable losses in there. You know, when you're number one, losing at home to an unranked in-conference opponent that has essentially a temporary coach situation and they're just doing terrible. Like, that's just inexcusable. And there's just always those moments like that, you know, like we talked about with Leach and sort of Tech having a great run of just being that team that had our number for a little bit. They just sort of always gave us trouble. And I think about that 2016 game. Obviously they were giving us trouble in that game, but it's one where I felt the entire time that I was watching it. I mean, it was like being on a roller coaster, and this can sound kind of Homer-ish, and obviously it's easy to say in retrospect, but the entire time I was watching that game was never in doubt. I knew that we were going to win the entire time. I never, from before it snapped to the most dire moments, I had no doubt. I knew we were going to win. It was like being on a roller, like when you get on a roller coaster, you don't think you're going to crash, you know that you're going to ride around on the rail. It's going to be exciting. And then you're going to end. It was like going to like a superhero movie. I compared it to, like, you knew even in the most dire moment when you're super entertained, you still know deep down that the good guy is going to win. And that's what happened. So I just thought it was super, super exciting. maybe some people were on the edge of their seat. I mean, obviously, maybe a little bit different experience when you're there. Super, big games like that sometimes are hard to watch in person because, sometimes you go to the bathroom and then you miss like a 90-yard touchdown. Things happen so quickly and then you don't really get the replay. But yeah, watching that on TV and just, I mean, I thought it was a great game before either guy went on to, do what they did. It was just a stereotypical two regional opponents. There wasn't really a whole ton of national implications from that. I guess there could have been, but it was just two regional opponents, drivable distance. Fans could go to the game like you did, and one of the most Big 12 games of all time, which I think is funny because it was on the tail end and sort of at the end of the Big 12 no defense, just sort of gunning at each other era. But that's what I think of. I think of just the most stereotypical Big 12 game of all time. A team in Oklahoma versus a team in Texas, regional game. They're going to go out there, prime time. No one's going to play defense, and they're just going to throw deep bombs the entire time. No one's going to run the ball. We're just going to continue to throw bombs, and it's going to be super entertaining.
To me, this was like the apex of that era. Like, this was the best of the best. This is the one you capture if you want to look at that for better or for worse. Because you're right, it was back and forth, action-packed all the way. If you were neutral, you loved it. But me over here, in the game, you're just banging your, head against the wall about, like, frustrated at the defense and frustrated about all this because, like you said, not a nationally massive game. OU was ranked 16th. They were 4-2. Texas Tech was 3-3, unranked, 1-3 in conference. So it wasn't like Tech was like that great of a team, but they were just so annoying. They wouldn't give up. OU couldn't stop them at all. Patrick Mahomes famously went 52 for 88, 734 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, which is just, he was unstoppable. It was unbearable to watch. Kiki Kuti, one of their wide receivers, had 172 yards. Jonathan Giles, 167. It was just unreal watching them. They were unstoppable. Mahomes ran for 85, like with 2 touchdowns. It was Tech just could not be stopped. It was frustrating and annoying. And you brought up the highlight part. Here's the thing: when you're sitting at the visitor section at Texas Tech, they only have one video board in the house, and the visitor section is behind it somehow, so you can't see anything. So we got 0 replays because there was no video board on the opposite side of the stadium. So it was just purely insufferable. And not only that, but the atmosphere was spicy from the get-go. We got out of our car. Within seconds, someone flipped the double birds to my now wife, and then it said FOU, sprinted off. We had old men curse at us. We had people try to fight us in the stadium behind us. It was a snake pit of an environment, which, like, I like that. Bring it on, all that. But, like, if you're bad and it's an annoying game, like, that's the thing. That's the thing that was annoying, is they weren't good and they didn't deserve to feel good.
Yeah.
But you're right. It was an entertaining game. It was fun looking back on it. I just can't separate my experience of that day because it was just a slog, man. It was a slog.
Yeah. And, we touched on it, not to cap it off for 2016, but we kind of touched on it before. 2 years later, we go back to Lubbock and we get a little it's like the teams weren't done yet. We had different quarterbacks. We had Kyler Murray for OU. And then, like we talked about early on, freshman Alan Bowman, who I think maybe is still kicking around college football somewhere.
At Oklahoma State.
Or maybe it was his last year.
He's at OSU.
He's at OSU now?
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so he's still kicking around a little bit. And, Lincoln Riley and Cliff Kingsbury as the coaches. And we go back, like we said, 2 years later and put up another 50-something to 40-something game. So, we turned the points down by about 15-ish on either side. So that's pretty significant. I mean, we give each side 2 less touchdowns, but still had by all standards, a massive shootout of a game. One where OU brought a much more complete offense, thankfully. Although I guess none of it matters now, but we did have a lot of running production back in that 2018 game. And then, of course, in between, we have to mention, 2017, we were able to stomp them pretty effectively in Norman. So, but I think about that. I mean, that's obviously not if you're a Tech fan, but for me, I think favorite game 2016, but sort of the golden era of OU versus Texas Tech in my mind was sort of like, Bobby, your college career, basically 14 on to 18, 19 ish. That was just sort of golden era for that, at least as an OU fan, probably not for a Tech fan.
Yeah, if we're talking even, like both teams are even, I would have it around that 2007 to 2009, just because of where Tech was with Leach and everything. But it's a separate, different animal altogether when talking about OU Tech with 16 through the Baker years, essentially. 15 through 17, and then obviously adding Kyler and all that. That Kyler game was very similar to the Baker deal, but a little less annoying. They held Alan Bowman in check a lot better. But I do want to touch on some of the good about 2016, because the offense was incredible. It was easily Joe Mixon's best game ever. No Samaje Perine this game. He ran 263 yards on 31 carries, 2 touchdowns, but then added 114 yards receiving with 3 touchdowns. So he was unreal. Baker Mayfield was unreal in his only game at Tech. Hearing it from the fans, 545 yards through the air, 7 touchdowns, 98.1 QBR. That is unreal stuff. And then D.D. Westbrook, who was the third, somehow a guy who had 202 yards and 2 touchdowns, is third build here. But it was just a genuinely insane shootout offensively. Great performance. Tech was just like a wet piece of like cardboard or brown paper sack. It was bad. Like Tech was bad defensively.
Yeah, it like you said, it's tremendous resume game for Mixon especially. I mean, I feel like when he was going into the draft, a lot of those highlights from that game, and obviously he had other games where he demonstrated similar skill sets, but showing off that ability to kind of do both as a threat. I mean, I that was his big selling point, and that was the game that really put the exclamation point on that. And then when all cylinders are firing like that, it's hard to look bad. But like you said, him especially, I think, is a standout performance if you're going to move beyond Baker.
Yeah, it was the moment where you're like, this guy could be an NFL guy as a solo back, because they'd been working him and Perine in tandem for the previous 2 years. So like, it was some amazing stuff from Joe Mixon. But now, hey, if we're gonna keep talking about best games. First of all, we're talking about that Baker shout out 2014. Great game there, sneakily. Bad OU team. Good OU game. Came back. That was the one where Tech was wearing that weird ombre uniform. It was our freshman year. Yeah, shout out Connor Asfor on that one. Great times. But look, for me, I think there's a clear apex of OU Texas Tech. In my opinion, it's the best OU, second best OU Big 12 game ever. Best OU Big 12 game of the remaining teams, probably. Actually, no, it is. The 2008 game. This is commonly known as a jump around game. Sam Bradford and number 5 Oklahoma hosting number 2 Texas Tech. Tech just sprungboard themselves into number 2 after that insane upset over Texas. The Crabtree catch, all of that. I'll never forget like hearing the news of that, like as we're leaving the OU game that was going on that year, whatever that previous game, I think it was Nebraska, and you're like, oh my God, OU might be back in this thing, because they lost to Tech or they lost to Texas earlier that year. Texas looked unstoppable, McCoy and all them, and this was OU's window back, and they made it. That the atmosphere around around Memorial Stadium was just palpable. It had that massive game vibe. Everyone knew what was at stake from the jump. And OU absolutely showed out, completely smacked Texas Tech. This is one of the all-time great, like, rewatchable OU games. just unreal stuff. They got out to, I believe, a 42-7 lead in the second quarter on number 2 in the country, capped by an incredible, I believe it was a fumble recovery interception from Travis Lewis that sent the crowd into a tizzy, and the PA announcer cues up, jump around, Everett, nothing, and folks, that was just a moment in history right there. Because one of our common complaints with OU stadium atmosphere is that it doesn't really have any. A lot of people sit on their hands. A lot of people are pretty chill. This was the difference. People were loud. They were going nuts. And it's never really felt that way since. I don't think we've had it. I think there was buildup like that against Ohio State, but it hasn't paid off like it did in 2008.
Well, I think, honestly, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this where it doesn't come out as like a bitter OU fan departing the Big 12 or whatever else. But the peak of the Big 12, the absolute golden era of the Big 12 was the 2000s. And you can make a pretty fair argument that, people talk about like peak this, peak that. 2008 may have been peak Big 12 because you're even underselling this game. You're mentioning, or you're forgetting a few big points. So Tech is undefeated coming into Norman.
Correct.
Like we talked about, Texas, nationally hyper relevant with now one loss only to Tech. OU, nationally hyper relevant, one loss to Texas. So we have this 3-headed monster situation just for the Big 12 South. But we're already talking about national title implications from this game. The top 3 in the Heisman are going into this game: Graham Harrell leading at Tech, Bradford at 2, Colt McCoy at 3, if you look at the odds. So these 3 teams, and I think this is why you just didn't get this any other time in OU history, is because it just hasn't. The Big 12 since then, you can argue, OU has been up there. Obviously, I'm not trying to diminish other teams. TCU has made their very respectable runs. Baylor has made a couple good nationally relevant runs since 2008. Texas was still relevant for a couple of years after 2008, but just that was peak Big 12. And in this game, you could almost argue that sort of 2-week span, or even that mid-season between Red River, Texas versus Texas Tech, and then Texas Tech versus OU. Those 3 games, that sort of midweek span, but especially these 2 weeks, like you talked about, Texas versus Tech, and then Tech rolling right into Norman. The whole world was watching, and everyone knew it. Everyone could feel it. Every single snap mattered. You just don't get that in the Big 12 now. And I'm not trying to excuse, OU doesn't have that exciting of an atmosphere, but of course you have a ridiculous atmosphere at places, because we're talking about, again, this 2008, it cannot be, you can't oversell it. I'm not even able to think of a time since 2008 where a single division of a conference has had 3 teams legitimately that competitive. There's been a lot of times where the SEC has had 2 with either Bama and LSU, or a couple years between Bama and Auburn. But I can't think of a time. I might be missing a glaring example, but a 3-headed monster all within one division of one conference where things are truly, truly competitive. You had the top 3 in the Heisman. You have constant, like, people are breaking records that year. It's just, you cannot undersell that game. And it is, recency bias a little bit with the 2016, because that's one that sort of we experienced in your college era and stuff like that. But that 2008 one, it's just thinking back at it, like I get goosebumps thinking about watching that one on TV, because I lived in Mississippi at the time. So I was in SEC country, and it was before the Bama sort of dominance and stuff, but people had they still had that SEC sort of thing. And then, that's really that 2007, 2008 is really when I really got into college football. And this game, just absolute insanity.
Yeah. Absolutely. The big games in the conference as a whole, like you mentioned, it wasn't just one team making a hot run. It was the fact that you had multiple all going for it, all in the same division, which was wild. I mean, let me put it this way: these are games that happened in November, essentially in November. You had number 1 Texas versus number 7 Texas Tech. Texas Tech played I think it was number 2 Texas Tech versus number 9 Oklahoma State the next week, and then they played number 5 Oklahoma. OU after that would then play number 12 Oklahoma State. There was a 4-week span where Big 12 games got 3 of the 4 college game days. It was absolutely nuts. The fact that you had all those teams that high, it just never happened again. Essentially because whatever happened Texas fell off, and Oklahoma State and Texas Tech just aren't sustainable programs to be at that level every year. So,
and obviously a lot has changed. You know, the recruiting landscape, 2008, very different than now. A lot of things have changed in terms of running a program, and that's why we've seen, you know, programs who have all the tools and all the pieces to be hyper successful, like Texas, you know, haven't been able to maintain as of yet. And then, like you talked about, you know, the smaller schools, Oklahoma State has always been able to punch well above their weight, I think, in terms of maintaining national relevance and what you could argue is a small market, especially for college football. What you could argue only because that's not as common of a term in college football. But yeah, it's just it hasn't been there we were the conference that year. Obviously, you know, didn't pan out with a national championship, but nobody else was that competitive. Nobody else had people at that level. And also, a quick side note, but this is sort of that era. I think 2007, 2008 especially is sort of what has sparked my just hatred for Missouri, because they're just constantly – because this year, right, we're talking about the Big 12 South is deciding who's going to play in the national championship and who's going to win the Heisman. Like, the two biggest things in college sports or in college football are being decided in the Big 12 South.
Right.
And then by the time we're facing off with Texas Tech with multiple national implications, we already know that just whoever wins this is probably going to play outside of the top 10 2-loss Missouri. Like, they should not, like, they were not deserving. Like, I'm against round robin and a championship, but, you know, if you were going to say, let's redo OU versus Texas or something in the Big 12 championship instead of OU versus Missouri,
right,
that ended up happening, you know, and then Missouri goes on to the SEC where they also don't belong and just kind of float through and collect accolades. Like, that's their thing. They're just floating along, collecting accolades by, like, I don't proximity that they
just
don't
existing.
deserve. Yeah. Yeah, they're just trying to put themselves in the right place at the right time. Missouri's like, yeah, I have, like, here's all my pictures with, like, all these presidents I've met, and Missouri's the doorman at the hotel. Missouri's
the cousin Greg of college football. They're just always kind of there. You know, they're not in charge. They're not competent enough to actually get it done, but they're just there.
Missouri's like like a mattress firm, like a mattress store. Like, they're in every town. They're there. They have the presence. Nobody really knows why they're there. Nobody's really sure how they're sustaining their brand, but they are, and they're there. That's Missouri for you.
They're there. You forget about them, but you pass them by and you're like, oh yeah, wait, you're still here. Yeah, that's
I guess they have the NFL though. So
true. But no, I mean it's the gold standard for OU football games, like, by far. The stakes, everything, truly unreal. And honestly, getting back to that level of competition, playing teams like this year in, year out, it's kind of why you make the move to the SEC. It's so years like 2008 aren't just like a once in a lifetime, and it was special. Don't get me wrong, it was. But if you can find a way to get back to having games like this go through Owen Field again, that would be big time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't want to cap it off here, but we are at sort of 30 minutes, and what a poetic ending to tie in just by pure coincidence how maybe the greatest OU versus Texas Tech game that's ever been played, ties directly into why we are no longer playing Texas Tech. We did not script this, but that is a beautiful sort of script ending to a tremendous story that OU has had with Texas Tech. Like we said, so many names, Lincoln Riley, significant to both schools, no matter what. I think as the years go on, people start to see that. Baker Mayfield, arguably one of the best college athletes of all time, depending on how you define that. Certainly one of the most significant OU players of all time. Obviously, significant can be defined a lot of different ways. Patrick Mahomes, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now, I guess, since Brady retired. So just so many names tied up into this series. I mean, Sam Bradford obviously not playing anymore, but massive name. And like we talked about, games with national implications, games with just so many amazing storylines, and not all of them had to be national implications. Some of them were just those, regional games where you saw no defense and you had that stereotypical Big 12 stuff. So I know we talked about in other episodes, is this going to be a team that we will miss playing, yes or no? I think for Texas Tech, for me, it's a resounding yes. I will miss seeing some of their uniforms are a miss. Some of them are really cool. I'll miss having a team where it kind of feels like a rivalry a little bit, but we're pretty certain of a win. And I'll miss some of these storylines. So I will certainly miss Texas Tech.
Yeah. And I'll say this, Texas Tech is a team, I don't think I'm going to miss them. I don't think I will, in a weird way. Because I think the things I miss the most about them or cherish the most are things that have passed, things that are gone already. Mike Leach, obviously, that era has passed. And, not only that, but I feel like the best parts of Lubbock were because I was a college student and I was dumb and wanted to get into shenanigans. Lubbock is like, it has that Tatooine vibe, you're not just because there's dust and sand everywhere, and it's just kind of it's just kind of a wretched hive of scum and villainy. It just has that vibe to it, which is fun as a college student. But like going back, I don't know. I don't know if that
Lubbock is it's hard liquor that comes in a plastic bottle.
Right. Yeah.
That's what it is. It's your off-brand whiskeys and vodkas and Burnett's and stuff that you enjoy when you are 18, 19, 20, 21. And then once you're out of college and everything else, one little beat up rundown shimmies and stuff like that just doesn't do it for you anymore.
It had its time, but I've kind of outgrown it. It's time to move past it and move on to better things. So not really. I'll remember the times fondly. I'll remember all the times fondly. The ones I still can't remember.
That's a good, yeah. I mean, that's arguably a better answer.
Yeah,
like,
but
you'll miss what was. Like 2008. It's just can't. I wasn't even thinking about that game really that much until you brought it up, and then just thinking about that. Like that's one of, as an OU fan, at least of our age, like mid to late 20s. That's a really significant one. I mean, it was like right when we were in sort of middle school, and just seeing that, the way OU was nationally, Tech where they were nationally, the conference where it was nationally, it was never the same. The Big 12 was never the same after that. Obviously, teams have had their ups and downs since then, and we didn't, the conference didn't just fall off a cliff, but yeah, that was the peak.
Yeah, it was like our best. It was like the best moments were good, but I'm not going to look at our schedule and be like, man, you know what? I wish Texas Tech was still on there. I wish that game was still happening.
Yeah,
because for the past 10 years they were nothing. For the 10 years prior to Leach, really, they weren't really much either. But they had their moment, and that moment was great. It was fun. It was wonderful. And, the side quest with Mahomes and Mayfield and all that was a fun deal too. But in the end, it's all over. you know, Baker obviously graduated. Lincoln Riley's gone, so that connection's not really there. It's just time to move on, and that's it. I also miss the cheese sticks. The fried cheese was very good.
Yeah, when you put it that way, I think I'm going to change. To cap us off, I'm going to change my answer as well. I don't think I'll miss, oh no, Texas Tech isn't on the schedule, but, outside of, especially, the 2008, 2016, and 2018 a little bit, but 2008 especially, I honestly don't think that I can think of off the top of my head. I might be missing a glaring example, but that might be one of OU's most significant Big 12 games of all time that we won. Yeah. And I think if you exclude any game against Texas and any game against Oklahoma State, I think Tech is right up there with some of the most significant one, like you talked about, the ones that went bad in 05 or the, ones that went bad in 07 or ones that went good in 08 and 2016, because 16 sort of built up to 17 in terms of building OU's national brand, which we know is important in this stuff. But yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a team who OU had more significant conference games against than Tech. But yeah, I don't know that I'll miss them, but I will certainly miss, in this sport, you don't know the ones that are going to be this significant, almost 2 decades down the road until they're passed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that is that for our episode of Bye Bye Big 12 Texas Tech. Ty, thanks for joining us here. It was nice reminiscing about the Red Raiders, and so Tech, it's been a good time. And I know last time we did this with K-State, we had a lot of K-State fans chime in and listen. So Red Raider fans, if you're out there, hopefully you didn't take it too hard. Your fried cheese is good. And you're still going to roast me in the comments for calling you Tatooine, but that's okay. Because sorry.
Any Tech fans that are listening, no, your town, College Station, not that great, but it's it's whatever.
Yeah, they're the school with the fake army, right? Like that's same place.
It's just a bunch of cactuses out there.
Cactuses. The cactus gang is gonna flood our mentions, being like scoreboard. Look,
views are views. Views are views.
Views are views. And look. Tech got their win. They got their parting shot off, but I was dead already. Like my soul was dead. So you can't kill me if my soul's dead. I don't feel nothing because I ain't got no soul. So good job. The one time you won was the most useless OU team. Good job. But all right, for me and Ty, this has been Bye Bye Big 12. Special series by the Schooner Pod. We'll catch you next time. Hope you all have a great one, and Boomer Sooner, everybody.